Hey y'all, it's Kim again. So this is the Robert Hur classified documents case against Joe Biden. This is video 2 of chapter 11. We're going to start right here where it says B, the classified documents may never have been in the Virginia home. The second potential defense argument is that Mr. Biden may not have retained the classified Afghanistan documents in the Virginia home at all, while there is evidence that he did. Most notably, his recorded statement to his monitor in February 2017 that evidence is not conclusive. First, as discussed in Chapter 7, while the evidence provides clues that the classified Afghanistan documents were stored in the Virginia home, there's no definitive evidence putting them there. Beyond this monitor recording, no witness, photo, email, text message, or other evidence establishes that the documents were ever stored in Virginia. When considering charges that Mr. Biden willfully retained the classified documents in the Virginia home in 2017, this absence of additional direct evidence that the documents were in the Virginia home in February 2017 is significant. Second, the Zwanitzer recording itself is not conclusive. When writing Promise Me Dad, Zwanitzer recorded dozens of hours of conversations with Mr. Biden, and those recordings show that Mr. Biden's statements were often imprecise and his meaning was not always clear. That was particularly true when Mr. Biden spoke elliptically or in asides, as he did when he briefly referenced finding all the classified stuff downstairs. Given Mr. Biden's tendency toward loose talk with Zwanitzer and Mr. Biden's limited precision and recall during his interview with our office discussed above, reasonable jurors may hesitate to place too much evidentiary weight on a single 8-word utterance to Zwanitzer from almost 7 years ago in the absence of other more direct evidence. Third, there are alternative explanations for Mr. Biden's statement to Zwanitzer that do not involve the classified Afghanistan documents later found in the Delaware garage. For example, Mr. Biden could have been referring to the collection of handwritten notebooks he kept when he was vice president, as discussed in Chapter 4. Mr. Biden retained more than a dozen such notebooks, which contained his handwritten notes from the president's daily brief and White House Situation Room meetings. Some of these notes were themselves classified. One of those notebooks was his AFPAC 1 notebook, which contained his detailed notes about the 2009 Afghanistan policy review and a copy of the handwritten Thanksgiving memo. Mr. Biden explained in his interview with our office that he believed he gathered his notebooks in the Virginia home after moving in, which was at or around the same time he met with Zwanitzer in February 2017. And we know from the recorded conversations with Zwanitzer that Mr. Biden planned to and did refer to some of his notebooks regularly while writing his book. Thus, some evidence suggests that when Mr. Biden told Zwanitzer he had just found all the classified stuff downstairs, he could have been referring to his collection of notebooks, including his AFPAC 1 notebook, which contained classified information, as explained in Chapter 12. We do not believe there are viable criminal charges against Mr. Biden for willfully retaining classified information in the notebooks. This would make the notebook explanation a potentially successful defense. Another possible explanation is that Mr. Biden could have been referring to the slim binder of classified documents he found at the Virginia home shortly after leaving office and giving it to the personal aide to return to the White House. As discussed above, this appears to have happened several weeks before Mr. Biden's recorded statement to Zwanitzer in February 2017. This explanation seems improbable, as Mr. Biden said he just found the classified material, which typically suggests more recently, a matter of hours or days rather than several weeks. And the personal aide recalled that Mr. Biden handed him a a single slim binder or folder of material which the aide believed related to calls with foreign leaders in the last week of the administration. It is unlikely Mr. Biden was referring to such a small amount of material when he said he had just found all the classified stuff, and it would have been a non sequitur during a conversation about his decision making on Afghanistan in 2009, but our assessment that this explanation seems unlikely does not make it unreasonable, and reasonable jurors could conclude that Mr. Biden's statement is wanted to refer to classified information Mr. Biden had already found and returned. Mr. Biden could also point to the possibility that the classified Afghanistan documents were never in Virginia, but were stored elsewhere without his knowledge, for example, tucked away in his Delaware home since the time he was vice president. We cannot rule out that possibility, as discussed in Chapter 7. If the documents were somewhere in the Delaware home for many years, someone must have moved them to the garage box after the move from the Virginia home to the Delaware home in July 2019, because that is likely when the garage box arrived in Delaware. But it is possible Mr. Biden or others moved the Afghanistan documents to the garage box without carefully reviewing the files or realizing they contained marked classified documents. As explained in chapters 14, 15, and 16, our investigation has revealed several other instances of Mr. Biden and others making similar filing mistakes. Unlike most defendants in classified mishandling cases, Mr. Biden was allowed to have classified documents in his home for 8 years as vice president. He also had layers of staff who were responsible for assembling, carrying, storing, and retrieving the types of classified briefing materials found among the Afghanistan documents. Even if Mr. Biden intended to keep the Afghanistan documents for some time while he was vice president to help him write the 2009 Thanksgiving memo, for example, or as reference material for the Afghanistan policy debates to come in the later years of the Obama administration, it remains possible that Mr. Biden lost track of the documents in the early 8 years that followed, or nearly 8 years that followed, and that he did not know he still had them after leaving office. Mr. Biden's house was also filled with paperwork and other materials from almost 5 decades in government service. He got boxes of files from nearly every political campaign he ran between 1972 and 2012, files documenting his more than 30 years in the Senate, files from his 8 years as vice president, and files relating to his family, his house, his car, and his pets. It is possible that Afghanistan documents, which were in ordinary folders that were not packaged or marked as containing classified information, were needles in the haystack of Mr. Biden's papers. While it is natural to assume that Mr. Biden put the Afghanistan documents in the box on purpose and that he knew they were there, there is, in fact, a shortage of evidence on these points. We do not know why, how, or by whom the documents were placed in the box. We do not know whether or when Mr. Biden carefully reviewed the box's contents. We do not know why only some of Mr. Biden's classified Afghanistan memos to President Obama from the fall of 2009 were found in the box, but several other memos he wrote during that time were not. And we do not know why Mr. Biden would have wanted to keep some of the other marked classified documents in the box. In particular, classified document relating to President Obama's second term foreign policy goals, which was kept in a folder right next to the Afghanistan documents, and which served no particular purpose of Mr. Biden's, of which we're aware. The location of the box containing Afghanistan documents in a seemingly random place in the Delaware garage, and Mr. Biden's cooperation with our investigation, both discussed above, could provide additional resources for jurors to conclude the Afghanistan documents were stored in the Delaware home without Mr. Biden's knowledge and were not in Virginia in 2017. Mr. Biden may not have found the facts first folder containing national defense information. A reasonable juror could also conclude that even if Mr. Biden found classified documents about Afghanistan in his Virginia home in February 2017, and even if he remembered he had them after that day, and even if they were the same documents found in the garage 6 years later and 100 miles away from Delaware, there is a shortage of evidence that he found both the Afghanistan folder and the facts first folder. This is important because even though the Afghanistan folder contained documents that were marked classified in 2009, there are serious questions about whether those particular documents remain sensitive today or when Mr. Biden met with Schweitzer in 2017. Thus, the Afghanistan folder alone is not a strong basis upon which to prosecute Mr. Biden for willfully retaining national defense information. And if Mr. Biden saw only the Afghanistan folder and not the facts first folder, which did contain national defense information, he did not willfully retain such national defense information. The only folder defense is not very strong, but it does find some support in the evidence. Mr. Biden spoke of finding all the classified stuff downstairs in the context of telling Schweitzer about the 2009 handwritten Thanksgiving memo. And the folder most closely associated with that memo is the Afghanistan folder, which held the raw materials that we know Mr. Biden must have relied on when writing the Thanksgiving memo. The Afghanistan folder contained previous handwritten and typewritten drafts of the Thanksgiving memo, some of which were incorporated nearly word for word into the final document. The folder also held a November 2009 memo from Mr. Biden's communications director, and Mr. Biden incorporated portions of this memo, again, nearly word for word into the final Thanksgiving memo. Thus, the evidence establishes that Mr. Biden used the documents in the Afghanistan folder to write the 2009 Thanksgiving memo to President Obama. Mr. Biden probably also used the documents in the facts first folder when writing the Thanksgiving memo, but the connection between that folder and the memo is not as strong. The facts first folder contains numerous documents relevant to the memo, but none of them are documents Mr. Biden must have used. And most of the materials in the facts first folder were from September 2009, 2 months before Mr. Biden wrote the Thanksgiving memo. Based on this difference between the two folders, some reasonable jurors may conclude that when Mr. Biden told Schweitzer he just found all the classified stuff downstairs, he may have been referring only to the Afghanistan folder, which reminded him of his Thanksgiving memo. The Afghanistan folder contained roughly a dozen marked classified documents, which could correspond to Mr. Biden's reference to all the classified stuff he found. And if Mr. Biden found the Afghanistan folder, it is possible he did not continue looking through the contents of the separate facts first folder, whose cover had no label or other indication that the materials inside related to Afghanistan. None of these possibilities are particularly plausible. There's no reason to think, for example, that after identifying the contents of the Afghanistan folder, Mr. Biden stopped looking through folders that were nearby, including the facts first folder, and that he never returned to these materials. But reasonable jurors who are unwilling to read too much into Mr. Biden's brief aside to Schweitzer, I just found all the classified stuff downstairs, may find a shortage of evidence to establish that Mr. Biden looked through the facts first folder, which is the only folder known to contain national defense information. These jurors would acquit Mr. Biden of willfully retaining national defense information from the facts first folder. D, for other reasons, a jury will be unlikely to unanimously convict Mr. Biden. Several additional facts would make it difficult for the government to present a case that reasonable jurors would unanimously find compelling, First, the Afghanistan documents are now almost 15 years old. While there is evidence that some contain national defense information in general, they concern a conflict that is now over in a country where there are no longer any American troops, about a subject, the 2009 troop surge, that has already been widely discussed in books and media reports. At a trial, we expect the defense would strongly challenge whether the documents still contain sensitive national defense information. Second, Mr. Biden was allowed to have the Afghanistan documents in his home for 8 years as vice president, and when the documents were discovered in his home in December 2022, he was again allowed to have them there as president. To prevail, the government must convince a jury to convict him for having the documents in his home in between, home in between in February 2017, about a month after he left the White House. Because of the possibility that even if Mr. Biden discovered the Afghanistan documents, he might have forgotten about them soon after, any criminal charges would likely be limited to the days or perhaps weeks surrounding his conversation with Monitor in February 2017. It may be difficult to convince a jury they should care about Mr. Biden's brief illicit possession of documents from 2009, particularly since he was allowed to possess the same documents both before February 2017 as vice president and after as president. Third, as discussed, to some extent, Mr. Biden will likely present himself to the jury, as he did during his interview with our office, as a sympathetic, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory. While he is and must be held accountable for his actions, he is, after all, the president of the United States. Based on our direct observations of him, Mr. Biden is someone for whom many jurors will want to search for reasonable doubt. It will be difficult to convince a jury they should convict him, by then a former president who will be at least well into his 80s, of a serious felony that requires a mental state of willfulness. Finally, while jurors might not find reasonable doubt in any one of the evidentiary shortcomings identified above, some jurors may find reasonable doubt because of the cumulative effect of some or all of the shortcomings. There is also insufficient evidence that Mr. Biden willfully retained the handwritten Thanksgiving memo. As explained in Chapter 6, inside the office of Mr. Biden's Delaware home, agents found his AFPAC 1 notebook, which contained his handwritten notes about the 2009 Afghanistan troop reviews. In the front of the notebook, binder clipped together, were the pages of the handwritten 2009 Thanksgiving memo in which Mr. Biden made his final argument to President Obama opposing the Afghanistan troop surge. The Thanksgiving memo discussed the November 2009 State Department cable, and the cable itself, which is marked as confidential, is clipped to the memo. In Mr. Biden's interview with our office, he said he guessed he wanted to hang on to the Thanksgiving memo for posterity's sake because this was my position on Afghanistan. The handwritten memo, though unmarked, contains information that remains classified up to the secret level. The State Department cable shows a declassification date of November 2019, but the State Department has been unable to tell us if it has been formally declassified. Though the handwritten Thanksgiving memo has been determined to be currently classified, we cannot prove that Mr. Biden believed it was classified after leaving office in 2017. The memo was derived from at least one document that was marked as classified in 2009, but during his interview with our office, Mr. Biden said he did not consider the memo classified when he discussed it with his ghostwriter, Monitor, in 2017. The memo concerned deliberations for more than 7 years earlier about the Afghanistan troop surge, and in the intervening years, those deliberations have been widely discussed in public, so Mr. Biden could have reasonably expected that the memo's contents became less sensitive over time because we cannot prove that he knew the memo was classified when he left office. We cannot prove that by retaining the memo, he willfully retained national defense information. As for the State Department cable, it does not appear to contain national defense information today, and there's no reason to believe it did in 2017. Therefore, the cable cannot be the subject of a willful retention charge under Section 793E. In addition, Mr. Biden told us in his interview that he does not recognize the marking confidential as a classification marking. To him, the marking means the document should be held in confidence, but not necessarily that it's classified. Although confidential is, in fact, a category of classified information enumerated in the governing executive order, we would likely be unable to refute Mr. Biden's claim that he did not know this. We conclude that the evidence is sufficient to meet the government's burden in accordance with the Justice Manual because we do not believe the government is likely to obtain a conviction at trial, and we decline prosecution. So there you go. That's chapter 11. Anyway, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.